They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in episode 79, Train and Grose. B-Train, Bertrand Berry, Mike Grose, Sean Crespin. Thanks for tuning in. And we are unexpectedly remote again today. Our union rep called and said, you know what, working conditions. We got to not go to train station. We got to work from home since it's a little toasty in our normal recording spots. So we are coming to you from our respective homes here in the Valley of the Sun.
You had to make an executive decision, Mike. It was one of those where we just didn't want to bake while we did the show. It's one thing to have baked goods, but we didn't want to be the baked goods as we talked about sports. So we just made a executive decision that I thought was well received by all parties involved.
Well, and you were tired of hearing me and Sean fight over the cooler that you have there at train station. You know, we start recording and Sean's like, you good? Are you comfortable? Can you get in some air? And I'm like, yeah, sure. That's nice. I appreciate it. And as soon as we start recording, he puffs out and he puts his shoulders back and blocks all the air from me. But by that time we're recording, so I can't do nothing about it.
You know what they call that?
So
they call that a veteran move, right there. That's just a veteran move. That's all that is.
In the business world, executive privilege, right? But nonetheless, we are coming to you remote, but we'll give you the same high quality Train and Grose that you're used to, and we kick it off like we always do. And I rolled the dice. There was a bunch of guys that I could have went with here, B-Train, number 79 in honor of episode 79. A guy that, and I don't know that we've mentioned this name on radio shows or podcasts before, but I'm hoping I got it right when I tell you that we'll send this one out to Ray Childress, who played for your Houston Oilers. I don't know, did you watch Ray Childress growing up when the Oilers were there and you were in Humble, Texas?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Him and Alvin Bethea, all those guys, Dan Pastorini, that whole crew. I was definitely Love You Blue, and Ray Childress is still a legend in Texas. He's got car dealerships out there now, and he's living his best life. And big shout out to Ray Childress, a native legend down in Texas.
Yeah, he's an A&M guy that got drafted by the Oilers and finished the career out 1 year up with the other team from Texas. So he I don't know where he's from originally, but he finished it up strong, college and pro in the great state of Texas.
There's no doubt about it. He's one of Texas's very own, and there's a lot of love for him still there, and he's enjoying the fruit of all his hard work post-career by venturing into other businesses and being just as successful as he was on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump into it. And we were talking before we started recording, and we are the evening of July 13th. So as far as we know, no serious breaking news specifically as it relates to the Phoenix Suns, right? And probably what will happen as soon as we push the stop button and Sean starts to get this ready to send it out to the universe, all hell will break loose after the fact. But all we can do is deal with the facts that we have in front of us. But one thing that caught my eye this week, and I think it bears watching, maybe not specifically for Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns in 2022, but Adam Silver, commissioner of the National Basketball Association, came out with some very, very interesting comments and very interesting timing on these comments when asked about what are your thoughts, and I'm paraphrasing here, but what are your thoughts on this whole Kevin Durant situation? And he basically voiced his displeasure with the way this one's going down. And he said, we are going to take a look at this and see what we can do to maybe get some control back over these situations. And we're talking about players dictating the terms of their exit from certain teams when they're under contract and the way they go about having these behind the scenes conversations to create super teams. But here's what I know. When the commissioner of a professional sports league talks, he's representing all the owners. So while this deal with Kevin Durant, he may get himself out of New Jersey, this is something the owners are going to look at, and I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to figure out a way to put the clamps on it and take back control of this process from the players.
So let me get this right, Mike. You're talking about they have a problem with meetings that are happening behind closed doors that the majority of the public isn't privy to, and that's only beneficiary to a certain group of people. You're talking about those owners that maybe or maybe not engage in those type of discussions from time to time. And in years past, this is exactly what they used to do to players time and time again, where they had no control, and now all of a sudden the roles are reversed, and now they have a big problem with it. The hypocrisy knows no end to me, Mike. And I think for these players, I think Draymond Green said it best, and I'm not always one to go to Draymond to get quotes, but I think he hit it right on the head with this one. He said that the players now understand that they are businesses. They understand that they are businessmen, and it's in their best interest to conduct themselves like the owners have done for decades. And the fact that owners held all the power up until, I'll say, about 10, 15 years ago, where you saw players start to really make moves and do things on their own, they need to go back and revisit just how one-sided it was in years past, and how players had very little control over their future and their playing career. And now that the players understand what their role is and understand their leverage, and they're starting to exert it, I would just think people who have benefited from the way that it used to be in years past maybe want to just slow down a little bit and voicing their displeasure about it.
Like I said, the timing for this B train for me is not coincidental, and the exact phrasing from Adam Silver tells me all I need to know. He didn't give a personal opinion. He didn't say, well, I would really prefer that we put the focus on the floor and da da. No, it wasn't any of that. His exact quote was, "We don't like to see players requesting trades, and we don't like to see it playing out the way it is." The use of the word "we" is very telling in this situation. This was not his personal opinion. So this is the owners, where, and again, on the one hand, I agree with you 100%. If you're the owners of the New Jersey Nets right now, you're like, man, we did everything right here. We gave Kevin Durant the extension. And Brian Windhorst from ESPN was on nationally earlier in the week, and he said, this one is very unique. And he kind of predicted that this was going to get the attention of the owners because Kevin Durant has 4 years and $200 million remaining with the New Jersey Nets. It's not like everybody saw, because in the past we've seen this coming where, hey, certain player has 1 year left on his deal, call it an expiring contract. You can make the move and kind of keep everybody happy. This is something where, again, he's got 4 years. The Nets gave him what he asked for. And 1 year into that deal, he wants out. And so you can understand, I think, at some level where the owners are coming from and still understand and agree with what you're saying. And so it'll be interesting. And like all things in professional sports now, it's going to come down to a collective bargaining agreement because owners don't have the ability to universally impose a change on the players without giving something up.
I would just ask that the fans as well as the owners look at football and talk about how contracts aren't really worth much. When you talk about football contracts, anything other than the guaranteed money up front, that contract is worthless. They can tear that contract up at any time. In basketball, it's just a little different where those contracts are fully guaranteed. So again, the owners benefited from this format for years, for decades. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden the players really start to understand what these deals mean and what type of leverage that they have within these organizations. And they're taking full advantage of it. And I think that this is a good thing because now they don't have to worry about where they're playing. They get to dictate where they're playing, just like the owners used to could dictate where guys would play, how long they would play there. And I just feel like to some degree they need to understand that players, this was coming. This was a long time coming. It wasn't going to be the status quo that it was 75 years ago when the NBA first started. There was going to be evolution. There was going to be guys understanding what their roles were. They were going to do their research. They were going to understand what their power truly is. And now you're starting to see that come to fruition. And a lot of people have problems with it. But when the owners were the ones that were dictating all the rules and all the terms, of how things were going to go. Nobody batted an eye. There's a new dawn in sports right now.
So now to this pending deal, or I guess it's got to be one big deal or a series of interlinked deals. There's a lot of conversation about how does it really happen, and there's been some focus on DeAndre Ayton and the Pacers, and is there a way to make this work with the Pacers, the Nets, and the Suns? Then all of a sudden, the Utah Jazz are getting in on the act, where they started things off by dealing away their highest paid player, one of the highest paid players in the entire league, Rudy Gobert, to the Timberwolves. And now all of a sudden, a team that I think we all agree has been one of the more disappointing, underperforming teams in the last number of years, where they put up big numbers during the regular season and don't deliver in the postseason. Maybe they're going back to square one. All of a sudden, Donovan Mitchell is available, and so Utah might be inserting themselves as a partner in the Suns, Pacers, Nets, now Jazz multi-team deal to pull this thing off.
I should have seen this coming, Mike. When you saw Quinn Snyder all of a sudden resign abruptly, everybody was really shocked by that. And then you saw Rudy Gobert being moved from Utah. Now you're seeing Donovan Mitchell being talked about as possibly a trade piece. And I think with Danny Ainge, he's up to something. We're not quite sure what it is, but he's up to something. And he's known for this type of thing, Mike, where he's going to get the better end of a deal. And if you're the Utah Jazz, it hasn't worked. The Donovan Mitchell, the Rudy Gobert, Quinn Snyder era, it did not work, Mike. They underachieved consistently. So they were trying to find something else that can work possibly in Utah, because the thing about it, Mike, you're not going to be able to get free agents to Utah. That it's not a desired destination to go. You have to be able to bring guys in through trade or through draft. And so if you're Donovan Mitchell, they've had a sample size with Donovan Mitchell. They had a sample size with Rudy Gobert. They had the sample size with Quinn Snyder. They saw that it didn't work. They're pivoting. And I think that depending on where they go, where Donovan Mitchell goes, possibly New York, a native New Yorker, there could be multiple teams in a blockbuster deal that, as you talked about, will probably be off air by the time this thing drops, and we'll have to wait till next week to have to talk about it. But something's amiss. There's too many stories going on all at once for it to be a coincidence.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's the old saying, B-Train, where there's smoke, there's fire. And the other thing that we know in the NBA, and I think fans are getting smarter to this. You can't say, well, I'll give you one draft pick and you send me Kevin Durant. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have salary slots, and you've got to have the numbers work out. And so oftentimes you see these deals takes at least 3, maybe more teams to make it all work, and then they submit it to the league office, make sure the accountants and lawyers sign off on it to make it all legit. So we'll keep an eye on it, but it could be a very interesting dynamic once it all shakes out. And like I said, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think you're right. We probably shouldn't have slept on the Jazz when your coach just abruptly ups and leaves. The front office has made a decision, and maybe not to the depth it's going to go, but Quinn Snyder probably said, "Hey, you know what? Thanks, but I've had enough. I'm going to go someplace else," but did it quietly. And so we just kind of took that as a standalone action. Now we're starting to see the dominoes fall, and when you say Donovan Mitchell's available, anything could happen at this point.
No doubt, Mike. It's going to be ramped up here in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, and I think they're trying to take a cue from the NFL, maybe step on the toes of the NFL a little bit and steal some of their headlines when they're just starting to get going. So there's a little gamesmanship going on between the different leagues, and I'm all here for it. There's a little bit of petty to it, and I'm here for the petty.
Keep the receipts is what somebody always tells me.
That's right.
Hey, in the big scheme of movements and free agency and everything that happens this offseason, at the end when we're doing all the grades and everything like that, this one probably, Suns fans will remember this, and Maverick fans will probably be excited about it, but in the big scheme of the NBA, it's not going to move a lot of needles. But JaVale McGee and everything he meant to this team, and I think for somebody in his situation, the uncertainty of not knowing, what the salary situation is here, what's going to happen, what's my role, who's going to be here. JaVale McGee signs a free agent deal with the Dallas Mavericks. And, for me, that kind of bums me out. I mean, I get how these things work, but I think, and we talked about this for the last 2 years, one of the things that James Jones and Monty Williams did was, they got Chris Paul, certainly. That was the centerpiece. But everything else worked so well. The role players, the JaVale McGees of this team fit, and they understood their role, and they bought in, and they were the reason why this team went to the NBA Finals 2 years ago, or they were the reason why the team set a record for wins this regular season. Look, I get it; it's business, but it also kind of sucks when you see somebody like JaVale McGee move on.
Mike, I think this is free agency at its finest. If you're a JaVale McGee, a guy that is looking to now secure himself for the rest of his life, a guy that I believe has 3 rings already. He's got one with the Lakers, and I think he got both of those with the Golden State Warriors once upon a time, I think in 17 and 18. And, hey, once you've got the rings, once you've been validated as a champion, now it's time to make sure that you're financially secure for the rest of your life. And you don't have time to wait on somebody else. You got to go and do what's best for you and your situation. And for JaVale McGee, it is unfortunate because he is one of those guys that has championship pedigree. He knows how to play his role, as you talked about, Mike. And unfortunately, if you're not a star player, if you're not Chris Paul, if you're not Devin Booker, there is a lot of uncertainty. And a guy like JaVale McGee, hey, he's like, hey, I got 3 championships. I've been there. I've gone to the mountaintop. I don't have to sit and wait and take a pay cut if I don't necessarily have to. I'm going to go somewhere where they actually want me now, and they're going to pay like they want me now. And so you hate to lose them, but you have to understand this is the business side of the game that a lot of people don't like to talk about. But when you have already climbed that mountaintop a couple of times, hey, now it's about let's stack those chips and see how the rest of my life is going to play out.
3 years, somewhere north of $17.5 million for JaVale McGee to make the move from the Suns over to the Dallas Mavericks. So we'll be seeing a lot of them, and still obviously in the Western Conference. All right, B-Train, usually we don't talk a lot about NBA Summer League. It is what it is, but this one was kind of interesting because of all the attention the draft got and, how the top players shook out. And again, it's early, it's Summer League, I get all that, but it's kind of cool to see, the top players living up to their billing. The highlights coming out of Paolo Banchero or Chet Holmgren. I mean, man, get the guy a hamburger. But I have a feeling, I might be wrong, and it's a long 82-game season. This man's going to play with a chip on his shoulder because of all the questions about his physical makeup and was that Gonzaga and all the things he has to answer for. But it's kind of cool to see all the young guys living up to their advanced billing this summer.
Mike, I think Summer League is very underrated, even though it's not the stars, it's not the guys and the names that you're accustomed to seeing during the regular season. This is basically a glimpse into what you're going to see in the future. It's almost like spring training here in the desert or out in Florida. You get to see the next generation at a discounted price if you're willing to go up to Vegas and go check it out up there at UNLV. There's a lot of opportunities to watch these guys play. And for Banchero, they're already talking about shutting them down. They've seen enough. Mike, I love the fact that he came out his first 2 games and he showed very well, but it's 2 games. And you have to have a little more of a sample size in order to make a proper assessment on what a young player is going to bring to the table. And for them to shut him or think about shutting him down already, I just think that's a little premature. And if you're Orlando, you really need to get as many good players and have those guys as seasoned as they can be before you start the season and not say, okay, we've seen enough. This guy's ready to play. You don't know that. He's playing against lesser competition. You want to see him continue to dominate that competition, get his confidence up. So once that regular season hits and comes around and camp comes around, then he's ready to go in with a lot of confidence, knowing that he's had some success wearing an Orlando Magic uniform.
Well, yeah, all of that, and then also just the practical matter of, I guarantee you, if you and I were in Orlando right now and we had the evening news on, guess what? They're leading off the sports with highlights from the summer league because of that. And there's a fan base who's been struggling here a little bit to get a little bit of excitement, get behind their guy, to have them or have everybody see him. I think that's good for business. Like we were talking about the players, it's a business. This is good for business, and I think having those highlights out there is good for business. So I agree with you 100%. Like let the man go a little bit more. You know, he's they face the future, whatever you want to call it, of that franchise. Let's work it a little bit. Hey, real quickly before we wrap up the basketball talk, I want to politics, I guess if you call it that, and sports always collide with each other. LeBron James out with some kind of interesting comments that he, depending on who you believe, he either clarified or walked back a little bit, but he was very vocal in terms of talking about Brittany Griner, who is still in Russia. And, he said something to the effect of, does she feel like America has her back? And do I even want to go back? And, people, I think, misunderstood him to say, this is me speaking, as opposed to him speculating about what somebody else is thinking. Later, he tweeted out saying, look, no, this is not what I meant. I'm simply saying she's probably emotionally drained with all that's been going on, having been incarcerated in a foreign country for over 100 days. And it's a really fine line for professional athletes, to get out in front of comments that can be construed as political. Like you in this country, you're going to end up pissing off half the people anyways if you take a stand. But if you sit there and be quiet, and we've talked about this before, Michael Jordan was ridiculed for not getting out in front of social issues during his time as a player, and even for a while after he stopped playing. So a fine line for LeBron James to speak out on behalf of Brittany Griner and her situation in Russia right now.
Mike, I think it's important that a LeBron James gets out there and says something. You might not always agree with what he says, but I think it would be much worse if he just sat back and said nothing. Knowing what this situation is, it's a farce, Mike. Every time you see her, she's handcuffed to another police officer. There's dogs in front of her. There's dogs behind her. For hashish? I mean, really? Like, what are we talking about? She's not a hardened criminal. She hadn't assaulted anyone while she's over in Russia. This is she's being used as a political pawn. It really is sad that such a big figure, no pun intended, in Brittany Griner is being used in this way by the Russian government to really try to highlight their relations here with the United States. And I just hope that this situation can be resolved quickly and effectively, and cooler heads will prevail. I know that's maybe a tall order when you're talking about the Russian government and what's going on over there and their situation with Ukraine and all that. So I just hate the fact that Brittany is used in this capacity. But you have to do the right things. You can't be caught with that kind of stuff and then expect to fall back on the fact that you're an American. Well, not everybody views Americans in the same way as America. Yeah. So she's even maybe viewed differently here than she thinks she's viewed. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes with this one. I don't like the optics of it every time that she's shown in custody. I just hope that they're able to get her out, and I think the pleading guilty was a first step in getting that done, and hopefully this situation can be resolved sooner than later.
The other things that I think about too, beyond the specifics for Brittany Griner, and I agree with what you just said, the other for me is like this shines a light on the disparity between the NBA and the WNBA, for example. And we talked about that with Title IX, where the Title IX anniversary just recently and how ESPN was celebrating that. But lost in this is Brittany Griner wasn't on a plane to Russia for vacation. Brittany Griner plays internationally to supplement her income because she doesn't make nearly, women players make a fraction of what their counterparts in the NBA does. And I'm not saying that the WNBA should be paid exactly what the NBA is paid, but the fact that they have to travel internationally and play year round to maintain a semblance of living as a professional athlete in 2022, I think that is ridiculous. And I think that should be, once Brittany Griner is safe and home, I think that should be part of this conversation. Like, going to Russia for professional athlete, that's out. I mean, that's never happening again. So there's a lot of subtext baked around this, like, because I think people don't understand, what was she doing? She had to go to Russia to supplement her income. And her window of playing is the same as an NBA player. She's got, if she's lucky, 10, 12 years as a professional athlete to make money. So you got to do what you got to do. We talked about JaVale McGee, signing that last contract to take care of the family. This is what she's doing. She's taking care of her wife, kids. Like, she's got to do this. And to me, that's the unfortunate subtext here. It doesn't get the headlines because you want to get her home, but people need to understand why she was in Russia in the first place.
Yeah, Mike. Now, as a guy that is really pro Brittany Griner, you have to look at the other side of it too. Yes, she did that to supplement the income, but she didn't have to. She wasn't forced to do it. She chose to do it. And when you choose to use those type of vices, if you will, then you have to be smarter about it. So, yes, we want her to get home, but on the flip side, you can't completely absolve her from her part in this. You have to be fair about it and say, okay, you can't have that stuff in your bag. Maybe she forgot to have it in her bag. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on the situation, but for her, knowing that she was not in the United States, you have to play it to the letter of the law, because those other countries don't have the same leniency, if you will, that the United States have on certain issues, like hashish and those type of things. So, I feel bad about it, but you have to know what you were getting into and where you were.
No, you have to have personal responsibility. I don't disagree with that. She's in the midst of a 3-year, $660,000 contract with the Phoenix Mercury. And, that works out to, thanks to the crack research staff that should be working on Pump the Brakes, that comes up to $221,450 this year, $450. Yeah. So nobody's going to feel bad for her for making almost $250,000. I understand that.
Right.
But again, the disparity and the window of earning is such that that's what players choose to do. It's a choice. I'm not saying she had to do it, but to put themselves in a position. My main thing is, this is not a sightseeing trip to Russia where she got tripped up. This was a work trip. But everything you said is 100% correct. We talked about that before. Like, I don't have any more sympathy for the actual what's keeping her there, at least initially, than I do for somebody that walks through airport security in Phoenix, Arizona with a gun in their bag. You own your actions, right? So, that part I'm okay with. But the other side is there's a lot of subplot to these stories. We'll keep an eye on it. And but going back to how I led into this, I think you and I are on the same page. Guys like LeBron James, when they have the platform, I think you make a decision knowing that some people won't always agree with you, but to take a stand and to make a comment like that, I like that. I'm glad to see him do that and speak out on behalf of others with his platform.
No doubt about it, Mike.
All right, on the other side, B-Train, we'll take a look at the news and notes from around the National Football League. That's coming up on Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
Welcome back in Train and Grose. Give us a follow on Twitter at Train and Grose. Just that easy. Hey, before we get into the NFL, I'm going to follow up on something we talked about last week. And Sean Crespin, you know how he likes his polls, and we talked about candles from the cereal company General Mills, and they're coming out with 5 candles. And good thing we didn't buy any this week, because they probably would have melted in the car on the way over. We ran a poll at Train and Gross, and we said, hey, look, based on Sean Crespin's question, would you buy cereal scented candles from General Mills? And we put a picture on it. And they look kind of inviting. You got the cinnamon toast crunch, the Lucky Charms, the Tricks, the Cocoa Puffs, and the Honey Nut Cheerios. I got the colorful tops, and I'm more intrigued now than I was before. But 75% of the people that voted in our Twitter poll, B-Train, agreed with you. They're like, nah, they ain't doing that.
Not even the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That's heartbreaking.
Well,
Okay.
Sean,
So did you go and buy one, Sean?
No, I have not been to my local Target in the last week, so I have not gone. I'll put it this way: I'll buy one for the group, and we can test it out the next time we're at train station. But it'll be Cinnamon Toast Crunch if I come across it. 75%. That number's high to me. 70. I figured 75%. Like I figured there might be more people leaning towards no than yes. But man, 3-1. That's a lot,
right? I know that is a lot. And the other thing, Sean, is because I know you voted yes and I voted yes, so we skewed the numbers right out of the gate. So I guarantee you, though, and I'll take a picture of us to prove it. When you get to Target, and I'll check my local Target out as well. It'll be like that around the holidays when a section's all picked over and, some of the candles are sideways or maybe one of them's broken because people are fighting over. That's what you're really going to see. People might have voted no in our poll, but once they get to the actual Target, they're like, damn, I want one of these. I want one of these Lucky Charm candles.
The hardest part about going to Targets is that none of them are stocked the same. They all look different.
No.
Not one Target looks like the next one. So you don't know what you're getting depending on what Target you go into. It's very confusing and frustrating.
Yeah, and I don't want this to turn into a pick on Target segment, far from it, but our local Target here
Target.
where I live, no, I know, but I'm agreeing with you. They're redoing the layout of our Target. So even if you go to the same one all the time and then all of a sudden you come in and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I went over to Target. I told Karen, hey, I'm going to run over real quick. I got to get some things. I came back like an hour and a half later. She's like, what took you so long? I said, I got lost, man. I was like trying to find stuff. So I had to reacquaint myself with my local Target. All right, I sent you guys a text this week, and I want to visit this.
Okay.
ESPN, they ran their simulator, their computer. They crunched all the numbers, all the teams, all the NFL teams, put the numbers in the computer, it spit out. Cardinals record this year, according to ESPN, 13-4 is what the ESPN computer said the Cardinals would finish up with in 2022. Now, I know we've talked about it. We haven't done predictions or things like that, but we've kind of danced around the side of it in terms of what we're thinking about the Cardinals, where we think they got issues, where do they stack up in the NFC West. I don't think any of us came anywhere close to 13-4 in the back of our minds. So what's wrong with us that the ESPN power indicator is coming up with?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have them having double-digit wins, Mike. And the thing that stands out to me is I look around the division first. Everybody got better, presumably, other than the Arizona Cardinals. I look at the conference. There's still a top-heavy conference where you've got the Rams, you've got the Buccaneers, and you've got a lot of other teams. So it's going to be hard to see this team. And with the schedule that they have, I don't know. Did they not factor the schedule? Because the schedule is brutal for the Arizona Cardinals. And the fact that before you even get started with preseason, you've got a disgruntled center, you've got a disgruntled quarterback, and you've got an injured star wide receiver. To me, that spells a lot of trouble in order of generating points for the Arizona Cardinals. So if you can't generate points in the NFL, it's very hard to win in this league.
Yeah, and the schedule thing, Grose, real quick, because I mean, if the NFC West isn't the best division in football, which division is? AFC West, right? Isn't that a pretty easy? Right. I think we'd all agree on that. And who does the NFC West play in their cross division this year? Is the AFC West. I mean, so the Cardinals open up the year with at home against the Chiefs. Then they travel to play the Raiders, and then they got the Rams right after that. I mean, when you look at those games, you've got 6 in your division, and your own division is considered one of the most difficult divisions in football. And then you got 4 more, so that's 10 games right there against the 2 top divisions in football.
Well, Sean Crespin, let's dive into that since you make that point, because they didn't just say the Cardinals will finish 13-4. They broke it down week by week, and they gave percentage chances of how this is going to happen. Since they have 13 wins, it's a lot easier to roll through the 4 losses as a start. So week 4, the Cardinals are going to lose to the Rams. So to your point, the NFC West is loaded. The defending Super Bowl champions are on the calendar after
That'd be week 3.
Week 3. I wrote that down wrong because it's Carolina week 4 and Baker Mayfield. So you got that. And then week 8, the Cardinals will pick up their second loss because the Vikings have a 53.1% chance of beating the Cardinals. And then to get loss number 3, you move all the way to week 10, and that again is the Los Angeles Rams. And then finally, to the point that you're making, spot on, Sean Crespin, the Denver Broncos will handle the Cardinals in week 15. The Broncos have a 55.1 chance of beating the Cardinals when they play later in the season.
Go ahead,
so
B-Train.
right there, your two losses to the Rams, a loss to the Vikings, and a loss to the Broncos is how the Cardinals' schedule shakes out according to the computer at ESPN.
So did the computer at ESPN forget about week 1 and the actual
Yes, they
team
did.
that's
No.
coming into State Farm Stadium?
Week
That
1,
would
the
be
Cardinals have it's the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Cardinals have a 52.4% chance of beating the Kansas City Chiefs week 1.
Okay.
Here, why don't I'll just hit this like I started the segment.
I'm just reading. You can look. Don't argue with the computer. To your point, week 2, Cardinals
Loss.
go on the road to the Raiders. 51.3% chance the Cardinals get the edge over the Raiders in week 2.
So you said their third.
We already talked about the loss to the Broncos in week 15, and I saw it. I forget what week it is, but the Cardinals have a very good chance of beating the other team from Los Angeles. Week 12, 51.3% chance the Cardinals defeat the Los Angeles Chargers. So they go 3-1 against the vaunted AFC West.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't take into account the actual opponents or where they played or the time of year that they played any of these opponents.
If they factored it all in, they were pumping all that information because I would imagine that somewhere
and they got 13-4 out of that.
Yeah. True story.
Okay.
All right.
And every team has a record. So, I don't have it in front of me, but we could go look at it and week 1, I'm sure we could figure out what the Kansas City Chiefs chances are. But when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs version of this, they're getting an L week 1 according to the computer.
This football team will have 3 losses before DeAndre Hopkins comes back. So, I mean, you mentioned their third loss comes into play. What'd you say, against the Vikings? Is
15,
that what you said?
The Broncos.
The Broncos.
Week 10. No. Week 10 against the Rams.
Week 10 against the Rams. All right. No, I'm going to go ahead and I'll make a lunch bet with anybody who wants to have it with me that they'll have 3 losses before DeAndre Hopkins returns. I mean, they're not beating the Chiefs week 1 when they're trying to figure that out, especially if Rodney Hudson continues to not come around the facility when training camp starts at the end of this month. We don't know if he will or he won't at this point, but like you mentioned, B-Train, that's a major issue. And what does your defensive front look like this year? No Chandler Jones, and you're going to be relying, and I don't want to go too deep into this because it is part of Pump the Brakes, but you're going to be really, really relying on an aging, coming off injury J.J. Watt to be a dominant force up front on that defensive unit. And I just don't know if you have it. There's too many question marks for me to talk about this team winning 13 games. I struggle to put them in double digits. And I'll tell you this, the way they struggled last year, you just rewind the clock to last year and watch how that offense struggled when Kyler Murray didn't have his safety blanket, DeAndre Hopkins on the outside. You just go back and watch that film and how they struggled, and they're not going to have him for the first 6 weeks as they're trying to get their feet underneath them. Get out of here with that. They'll have 3 losses before he comes back in week 7.
Wow. The negativity that I have to deal with when I come to work on some days is it's astounding. And while you were on that little diatribe, I went and looked it up. The way I won't go week by week here. You can do that on your own if you so choose. But the way they have the AFC West shaking out is the Broncos 10. They got it really tight, actually. The Broncos are going to win 10. The Chiefs are going to win 11. The Chargers are going to win 10, and the Raiders are going to win 9. That's how the AFC West shakes out, according to the big computer in Connecticut.
So Mike,
don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger here.
I'm not shooting the messenger. I'm actually shooting the computer. I'm like, so really the computer says that every team in the AFC West is going to be 9 wins or better. No team is going to have a losing record in the entire division.
That's what they're saying.
It's also in the wrong order. The Chargers are the best football team on paper. If this is going strictly by paper, and that's all it can go by, right? The San Diego, excuse me, my fault. I'll put $1 in. There you go.
Wow.
The Los Angeles Chargers with Khalil Mack and company, and the way they bolstered that secondary, and another year for Herbert, and go down the list. That is on paper the best football team in the division, with the loss of Tyreek Hill with the Chiefs. We want to see what that offense looks like first, right? Because if you go on paper, the Chargers are the best football team in the division, followed by the Chiefs, and then the Raiders and Broncos will battle it out for third and fourth, I think, in that division. If you want to go strictly off of paper, that's the way it should shake out. So, yeah, this computer, I mean, they really should go back, take a look at that algorithm, figure it out again before they start putting out articles like this, because that's a little rough. That's a little rough.
The nice thing here is that we can flag this, and then after week 17 of the NFL season, we can call out the computer on the podcast at that point. We can tell them they were wrong. But like I said, I just read it, and like I said, the negativity. Like I just,
I mean, it's just.
I just try.
I would say less negativity, more reality. Sometimes reality isn't a positive conversation. And I'm not saying the Cardinals are going to be brutal this year, but I mean, 10 wins to me is kind of the ceiling I have them at this point. Not 13. I mean, this whole everything going against this football team coming into the year. I mean, where do you give them the edge week 1 against the Chiefs? Where? You would say at wideout, right? Oh, the loss of Tyreek Hill. You have DeAndre Hopkins. Oops, no, you don't. And damn sure don't turn to coaching. You're telling me you're going to give Andy Reid and Cliff Kingsbury with a full preseason to prepare for that particular game? What's Andy Reid's record coming off a bye? It might as well be the same thing, right? Week 1. I'm sorry. You're going to get out-coached. You're going to get beat down. You're not winning week 1. You're not. You're just not.
Wow.
Sorry.
All the computer, Sean Creston. Listen to that.
Tell me where I was wrong.
Baked into there, one of the places I think you're right, and we've got final roster spots to be decided. A name that I had forgotten about with all the shakeup and the movement and everything like that. Ndamukong Suh is still looking for a job. See, does he fit here? Somebody you'd be interested in giving a flyer on? Because he's saying maybe I'm going to go to the Cleveland Browns. So clearly he's looking for a spot.
He's looking for a spot that has a chance to win, and I think for Ndamukong Suh, I don't think this is an indictment on his ability to play. I just think it's an indictment on his age, and he's going to be one of those guys that they don't want to sign before week 1. They want him to get through week 1 so his contract's not fully guaranteed. He's at that stage of his career where they want him to – they value him as a player, but they just don't want to give him all that guaranteed money because of his status as far as being a veteran in the NFL. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. is still on the street. There's a lot of quality football players still on the street. So if you were to just look at that list, you could put together a pretty good team of guys that can go out and get it done. So it's going to be interesting. There's still a lot of shakeup to be done in the NFL. There's still unfortunately, there's going to be an injury that's going to really cripple a team. Unfortunately, it's just part of the game. I don't wish it on anybody. I don't like putting it out there in the atmosphere, but I've been around this game too long to know that it's just part of the ebb and flow of a season. There's going to be major losses early on, and there's going to be guys that during the course of the season that are going to not have their services available any longer. So there's still a lot of storyline to be played out before we start to get to see how this season is really going to shake out.
Completely agree. And to put a finer point on your comment about Ndamukong Suh, he's 35 years of age. And, he does fit that bill of exactly what you're talking about, a guy who will sit tight and wait around, see that first week unfold, and then I think make a decision where he thinks he has the best chance to go in, make some money, number one. Number two, a chance to win. and where he can help. And, that I think is where in the past, somebody like Steve Keim has brought in players like that and they've made contributions, hasn't done much of that lately. And, that to your point about how the NFL works, right? Once you get to a certain age and that you're off that last big contract, if you want to keep going, you got to figure out a way to do it and I guess play the game within the game, right? And understand how that situation works. Because the key point that you made there is those contract after week one, you're week to week. You get a number, but it's a week to week, and it's only guaranteed for those games that you actually play. All right, down in Carolina, Baker Mayfield, all of a sudden he's talking and he's happy and can't understand how it went so bad in Cleveland, but he's really happy to be in Carolina. Thinks it's going to work out really well. Thinks he and the other quarterbacks on the roster are going to get along well and help each other out. It's amazing how a change of scenery has been so good for this guy in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I don't know about those guys working to help each other out, and I know they'll be professional about it, but make no mistake, it's a quarterback competition. Both guys want to go and be the head guy for the Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold is a guy that's a journeyman already, a high draft pick that hasn't worked out well. Now you have Baker Mayfield, a guy that was a number 1 overall pick that hasn't worked out well, Heisman Trophy winner as well, that hasn't worked out, and he's going to be motivated to go out and play well. I think both players are going to have a chip on their shoulder, but I think the chip has always kind of been there for Baker Mayfield. I think it just got seismically bigger for himself. You think about the Progressive commercials and how entrenched in the community he tried to be in Cleveland, and for them to basically dismiss him and give a guy that has his own baggage a record contract. Yeah, that has to make him feel a certain way, and so he's going to be motivated. I think if you're the Carolina Panthers, you couldn't have asked for a better situation with your quarterbacks. You've got 2 guys that want to prove that they can still play in this league. So in this particular season, you're probably going to get the best of both of them. And whichever one wins that job is probably going to want to play at a very high level. So I think the Carolina Panthers need one of these guys to really step out and be that guy, because you start looking at that division that they're in, it's really top heavy with the New Orleans Saints and of course the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With the Atlanta Falcons, we know they're in a little bit of a different situation, but to think that there's going to be 3 teams come out of that division, no way, in the NFC. And so they're looking squarely at New Orleans like, we're coming for your spot. We're coming for that number 2 spot, because if they can finish number 2 in the NFC South, there's a very good chance they can make the postseason.
Meanwhile, the sexy devil, Jimmy Garoppolo, still on the roster in San Francisco. And we'll wait and see where he goes. And it's amazing to me continually the stories that, and again, the PR machine working, right? But how Trey Lance is doing the extra time. Sean mentioned it last week. Hey, he's been working and talking and hanging out with Steve Young, picking his brain and all. I don't know, and we mentioned this before, but it continues. They convincing the fans, they convincing the players in the locker room. Ultimately,
or themselves.
Or themselves. It's going to come down to, what does Trey Lance do on the field? Can Trey Lance perform? We know what Jimmy Garoppolo can do, and you've decided you want to move away from that. You decided that before last season when you drafted Trey Lance. And now you're at a situation, you're just figuring out how to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and get the worst, or the least, amount of pain in that transaction. And so, this one to me, outside of course, we focus on the Cardinals here and Sean with the Raiders. This whole thing with the 49ers is going to be really fascinating to watch through training camp and as this season starts out.
Mike, I really believe John Lynch is really just trying to hold on to the last minute to see if he can get somebody to bite. He's waiting on maybe somebody in camp losing a quarterback, a high-profile name, and of course you got that bargaining chip in Jimmy G to work with. Yes, they want Trey Lance to be that guy ultimately, but you just don't let a guy that's been to 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl with your organization just walk out of the door for nothing and have to have that salary on that dead money on their cap you'd rather not do that. You'd rather have somebody come and rescue you. But right now, everybody's set. Everybody's looking forward to training camp.
Yep.
Everybody's looking forward to seeing what their teams are going to look like and develop their teams. And so I understand what they're doing, but this goes back to that conversation we had about the NBA, where the NFL, they control the rights to Jimmy G. He has no rights in this situation. He's basically sitting and waiting to see what the San Francisco 49ers want to do. And meanwhile, his career hangs in the balance. I'm sure he would love to be with the team and have an opportunity to learn the playbook like Baker Mayfield talked about a couple days ago and really get a chance to go in and compete and get those reps in now during the summer months. But unfortunately, the San Francisco 49ers just don't see that as a priority. They're looking at what's in the best interest for them. And right now for them, if things don't go well for Trey Lance, they still have that piece in place with Jimmy Garoppolo, where if Trey Lance doesn't do what he needs to do, they can always go back to Jimmy G and just say, hey, guy, hey, man, we're sorry we treated you poorly, but, hey, can you bail us out another season and give us some time before we get ready to dismiss you again? So this is one of the more fascinating stories in the NFL, Mike, and a guy that is as accomplished as Jimmy Garoppolo is, I really think he deserves better than how he's being treated currently.
Completely agree. Real quickly, as we wrap up the NFL talk year-round, of course, Lamar Jackson. A lot of attention paid to Kyler Murray earlier in the year, talking about his social media and what he's doing. Lamar, he put a picture of the gold teeth out saying, I need money. And then I think it's pretty funny. He followed up with, man, I can't believe the Bleacher Report. They take things on social media and try to make a whole big story out of it. I think he's dumb like a fox, like just putting this out there saying, hey, let's go, people. We're 2 weeks away from the start of training camp.
Mike, this is a clear-cut example of a guy that he's playing, as you said, he's playing possum right now. He understands what his value is, and he's just looking at the most recent contract for a quarterback in the NFL in his own division. You're talking about Deshaun Watson, a guy that got $230 million guaranteed. He's looking at it as like, okay, this isn't that hard. I sent out a text message to you and Sean. I said, look, if I'm Lamar Jackson, this is easy. Give me that contract plus $2 million. We're good to go. What are we talking about? Let's get this thing done. Let's get it worked out so we can all get to the business of being healthy and going into the season with great expectations. He doesn't have – go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you think what's holding it up is the contract that Cleveland decided to give Deshaun Watson? Because you are 100%,
yes.
You're 100% correct, B-Train. That's the market now. Not my fault if I'm Lamar Jackson, but that's the market, and I've got that MVP award, so yeah, you're 100% right. It's going to be that contract plus 2. But I think the rest of the league is looking at it like, well, that contract was so out of whack that we can't afford to do that. So, but if you're Lamar, hey, that's the market. That's what it is.
I don't care because, one, you're saying that a quarterback that's got that kind of baggage and that little production in the postseason is worth $230 million guaranteed. Hey, I've gotten better every year. I've got an MVP trophy on my mantle, and I've been no problem off the field whatsoever. I am the ideal quarterback and a guy that's going to have a chip on his shoulder because there was a recent poll that came out that said he wasn't a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, which is mind-boggling to me. But there's a lot of motivation for Lamar Jackson to just sit and chill and just let the numbers keep going up and up and up and up. Yes, you're playing a game of roulette because if you get hurt, it could greatly interfere with your chances. But we saw with Dak Prescott, if you're that important to a team, they'll find a way to compensate you. And I think with all that has been going on with the Baltimore Ravens and how much they're dependent on Lamar Jackson to be out there and be healthy and to be successful as an organization, they have no choice but to pay him that deal. And I think he's just going to sit and wait till they finally come around. They're kind of playing a game of chicken, and he's just like, hey, you can play chicken all you want. Eventually, we're going to the table, and you're going to cut that check.
There you go. We're a couple weeks away from training camp starting around the NFL. Some of these situations, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, Kyler Murray here in Arizona have to get resolved, I would think, just so the distraction isn't there when these teams roll into camp. Real quickly, a guy we talked a little bit about last year, and ASU guy gets a fresh start, and N'Keal Harry dealt from the New England Patriots to the Chicago Bears. I think, for me, we watched him at ASU, saw everything he could do. And then I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but just surprised maybe that he didn't have a better start to his NFL career in the Patriots organization. But he's got a shot now, getting a fresh start, moving over to Chicago, young quarterback. And so I'd like to see what N'Keal Harry can do, like I said, with all of that New England situation behind him.
Mike, this is a curious situation here because the one thing that the New England Patriots is not in the business of doing is not in the business of giving away great receivers. And so when Bill Belichick basically cuts you and cut ties with you, he's basically saying he doesn't have much value for you. And we've seen this in the past. We saw a Chad Ochocinco. At one point, we saw this with Antonio Brown. Guys, for whatever reason, they weren't ready to go long distance with. They just felt like their better days were behind them. They just cut you. They don't let you hang around and try to work it out. They just sever ties. It's a really cold way of going about your business, but it's been effective for Bill Belichick and the Patriots organization. And I hope for N'Keal Harry that there are better days. I hope that teaming up with a Justin Fields can rejuvenate his career, because usually this doesn't end well for a set player that Bill Belichick has given up on.
Yeah, the story is that the Patriots decided that cutting ties with N'Keal Harry was worth or was necessary, to pick up about $1 million in salary cap relief. But when you're talking about a salary cap for a team well over $200 million, that's a drop in the bucket. So I think there's probably, as a friend of mine says, a little from column A, exactly what you were saying, and a little from column B with the financial relief. But again, Justin Fields and a wide open competition for N'Keal Harry. Let's hope he can make the best of it. We like to see local kids do well when they get the chance on the big stage. So we'll keep an eye on that as the season unfolds. All right, we're going to step aside here one more time, come back, some news and notes, some quick hit items, and stay tuned. Still to come, pump the brakes and dad jokes on Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
Welcome back in. Stick around. After we're done with this segment, we will turn it over to Sean Cressman and B-Train for Pump the Brakes and Dad Jokes. Looking at the world of college football, I was reading a story today. John Wilner, who covers the Pac-12 for the San Jose Mercury News, he's kind of I think his title of this column is called The Hotline, and kind of dialed into everything. Apparently, the whole USC-UCLA thing to the Big Ten kind of blew up a little bit within the University of California system. They're a huge system out there. UCLA, of course, the flagship, although people in Berkeley would argue with me where they would say the University of California really is the flagship. But here's the deal. The Board of Regents, the people that oversee all the University of California schools, had no idea UCLA was making this move. And the athletic director and president of the University of California in Berkeley are raising holy hell about how the move for UCLA is going to cost. And I hadn't heard this before, that the move with these two teams leaving, if they don't do anything else, this is going to cost each member of the Pac-12 upwards of $25 million a year once this all the dust settles and USC and UCLA are officially gone. And a lot of these schools, we were talking about this during the break, a lot of these schools running programs at a deficit. UCLA, Arizona, Cal, not among the biggest revenue generators all in. Of course, individual programs like a men's basketball, a football program might make money. But when you look at the entirety of an athletic program, a lot of times they're losing money and have to be subsidized by the university. So anyways, it's up in the air whether or not the University of California Regents can do anything about this. But UCLA taking a little bit of heat for doing this move so undercover and not involving anybody in their decision.
Yeah, this is one where I think UCLA and USC, they kind of got together and like, hey, we're out of here. We see the handwriting on the wall. we need to go get with the big dogs and figure this thing out. And they left a lot of people hanging, Mike. And obviously the California schools, you think about Washington, you think about Oregon, it just seems as if this is a big mess, and there's going to continue to be fallout from this whole situation. And the logistics of how they're going to make this work, I think, is going to be a issue in and of itself, as we talked about in previous broadcasts. And
Yeah.
I just don't I get it, but I don't get it. And talking about the Big Ten, it just seems so, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel good. I mean, you're used to kind of seeing certain teams play each other, and from a geographic standpoint, it made sense. Okay, Stanford plays Southern Cal, UCLA. They're all in the same state, so it makes sense to play them. And Oregon and University of Washington and Washington State, they're all in the same area, so they made sense. But now you're going to see all of these cross-country matchups, and I hope that the viewing public has an appetite for it, because right now seeing USC versus Nebraska just doesn't move the needle for me.
Well, and I think buried in that whole thing is the fact that whatever the chancellor and the athletic director was saying about the move, they didn't say anything about what you were saying. Like they're resigned to the fact that this is purely money. That's what it is, and they're like, hey, like, okay, fine, don't talk to me about the rivalry between two University of California schools, University of California, Berkeley, University of California, Los Angeles. Don't talk to me about shortened travel schedules. It's about the money, and that's the first time I'd heard a price tag like that dropped on it. And it really does show the corner that this move painted the rest of the Pac-12 into if those numbers are to be believed. And they're probably elevated a little bit to make a point once they're, coming out swinging here. But, you look at how far behind the Pac-12 is behind the other conferences anyways, in terms of the revenue that they're sharing. And to have this happen shows that they can't stand pat. They're not going to go back to being the Pac-10 here, minus UCLA, USC. They've got to do something, and that could be the ACC, it could be the Big 12, it could be something, but they've got to figure something out, because again, it's a money play at this point, and that's what really is going to drive all of this. If we didn't know it already, this type of conversation really makes that point for us.
Yeah, Mike, literally, they cannot afford to stand pat. They have to do something else from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. One of the guys that I got to interview, I don't know if it was for our show that we did B-Train, or if it was because I was hanging around the radio station a lot during those days, but I got to interview Mike Gundy back when the Oklahoma State team was coming down here for one of the bowl games. And he couldn't do it. I think it was when you and I were doing the radio show, and he couldn't do the interview because they were going to be at practice. But he said, "Hey, I'll record it with you guys." And so I went in and I recorded an interview with Mike Gundy, and I liked him. Like at first, like you got the 40, I'm 40 or whatever, that comment, and you got him dancing in the locker room, the mullet and all that. I think if for me, I look at him and I just kind of like, he puts it out there, right? And he had some comments around the Big 12 Media Day. Obviously they're doing the Media Day talking about the football, but wrapped around that, they're having business meetings while all the schools are together. And he said he was joking, but I think in jest, a lot of serious things are said. He wanted to know why we letting Oklahoma and Texas in the room when we're talking business. Like, you made your decision, you're leaving. And he goes, I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing people from Oklahoma and Texas helping us decide how we're going to do things. You played your cards, you're out. You shouldn't have a say-so in this. And he said, hey, they might take some of the good ideas we have here and take them over to the USC. The SEC. That might have been part of the joking part of it. Not that the Big 12 is going to learn anything from the SEC, but I think it really does, it does expose a lot of feelings. Again, Oklahoma can break up with Oklahoma State. We already talked about it with Texas and Texas A&M. Anything's possible, and people have some real feelings on this whole thing, well beyond the business side of it. It's personal.
Oh, it's personal, and it's going to get petty, Mike. And when you start talking about guys that have had their way for a number of years, and now all of a sudden they don't get their way, you start to see guys really show what they're really made of and how they really feel deep down. And I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if you get a bunch of sound bites between now and the start of the season, and definitely at the end of the season when you start to see these moves and these transitions in the other conferences start to happen. I just think that if you're Oklahoma State, there's no incentive to play Oklahoma anymore. If they're going to leave us high and dry, then why are we going to play them? It's just like what happened with Texas and Texas A&M. Like when Texas A&M bolted for the SEC, they ceased to stop playing Texas. And you talk about one of the biggest rivalries in college football, and then within the same state, and they didn't play each other over really leaving. I can see the same thing playing out in Oklahoma. It's one state over, so there's always going to be a lot of the same feelings, a lot of the same players are from the same areas. I mean, it's there's a lot of familiarity there, and unfortunately, you're not going to see these rivalries that we've come to know and love in college football in the near future, and I'm a little sad about that.
No, and he talked about that. He said, I don't know. He goes, we got 2 years left in Bedlam, right? And we don't know what happens after that. He goes, look, I'm looking at my non-conference schedule. I'm scheduled out through 2033. So maybe after that, who knows? So, the fact that, he's being pragmatic about it. He goes, look, you could figure it out. You could do buyouts and logistically, but hey, they made their decision. That's basically how he's looking at it. Kind of to your point a moment ago, keep the receipts, man. Like, Oklahoma State didn't make this mess. Oklahoma did, and don't look for Mike Gundy or the Cowboys to help them figure out how to get out of the mess that they created when it comes to the things that fans really, the games. But the rivalries, that's what made college football so great. And I'm sorry, but Oklahoma State, Colorado doesn't do it for me if that's what the future holds.
Yeah, Mike, and I actually agree with Coach Gundy where. Yeah, if you're going to leave, then don't be involved in what we do going forward. If you make the decision to go and leave, then you go ahead and leave. Don't stick around and try to help us figure out what happens next. No, we got it from here. You've made your bed. You go lie in it, and we'll figure out what's best for us going forward. I agree with that.
All right, real quick. I agree too. Real quickly before we wrap this up, B-Train, did you guys fill out your All-Star ballots for the Major League Baseball? The All-Star games coming up. The teams finish up games on the weekend, and then they get to the All-Star break. You guys have a vested interest in that?
I started to fill mine out. I mean, mine has a lot of Astros on it, so yeah, I'm a little biased in that respect, but I think it's going to be a great time, and I don't think there's going to be too many surprises on that roster. I think there's been a lot of players have great years so far in the baseball season, and there's always going to be guys that feel like they should have made it. There's 62 guys I think make the team, so it's hard to find a snub if you've got 62 players playing in an All-Star game.
Hold up, you said baseball's being played right now?
I hear you, Sean. I hear you, brother. I
got NFL Network on right now in the studio here at the house. I don't know. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. No, I didn't fill out my ballot. I didn't see it.
One of the things that Major League Baseball did, which I think is pretty cool, and talk about how this team tries to stay relevant, is they gave the commissioner the ability to make what he's calling a legacy selection. Maybe an older player that didn't get the votes to be in the All-Star game, but they want to see and want to celebrate, or maybe it's a player that did something beyond that wouldn't get picked up by the fans. But this year, the commissioner put Miguel Cabrera from the Tigers in, and Albert Pujols from the Cardinals in as the legacy selections. And you talk about baseball and how do they engage with fans and how do they keep themselves relevant. It's a baby step, but you think I was watching the highlights last night, and Miguel Cabrera stole the 40th 4-0 base in his long Major League Baseball career. Afterwards, he's sitting in the locker room, and the reporters came up to him and asked him about the stolen bases, and he actually quoted Rickey Henderson in the locker room. And it was one of those great, just so self-aware. He goes, "Hey, when you got to run, you got to run." And the video, think about all the great highlights of Ricky Henderson stealing bases throughout the course of his Major League Baseball career. And Miguel Cabrera stealing a base against the Royals last night was the exact opposite of that. But it was so funny. And so I think, things like that, I know baby steps, and it's not going to, in and of itself, it's not going to save it. But like I said, the legacy selections, you think about what Miguel Cabrera has done in his career, certainly what Albert Pujols has done in their careers, an opportunity to celebrate it, but not take away a spot from a younger player while they do that.
I mean, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. I know there's going to be a lot of people excited about the All-Star game. It's one of the few All-Star games where they actually play it out the right way and it's not become a farce. So I think it's most true to form of the major sports. So it should be fun. And I know a lot of guys are going to be excited to go out there and really celebrate those two legends and be excited for their own opportunity to go out there and play amongst the greats.
Well, and the other thing, too, it's mid-July when this game is played, and it might be the first time people sit down to actually watch a baseball game, right? And so it goes back to the point that we were talking about last week when we were talking about baseball, trying to hang in there. All right, B-Train, that's going to do it, man. We do 3 segments as a lead-up to Pump the Brakes and Dad Jokes, and that's coming up next on Train and Grose. Welcome back in Train and Grose, final segment of the podcast number 79. And listeners know, or longtime listeners know, I should say, what comes next. Sean Cressman rolls in. He, I guess the research crew worked from your house today, Sean. You got the list there for Pump the Brakes?
Yeah, we all hung out here. We've got the Packers and New England Super Bowl replay on NFL Network right now, so it's been been a good time. Watching Brett Favre carve up the Patriots a little bit. We've just been hanging out.
Did you buy Gatorade for everybody over there today?
G2 orange, room temperature.
Yeah, I'll be right over.
Okay, you guys know how this works. I'm going to give you, that's an inside joke from the old Train and Grose on the terrestrial radio. I'm going to give you guys a statement from the world of sports. You tell me if you're pumping the brakes on it or if you're going to roll with that particular statement. So we start with, you guys always make fun of me, that I love my polls, right? Well, this time of year, the dead time before NFL training camp starts, you get a lot of polls. You mentioned one earlier, Grose, about the Arizona Cardinals winning 13 games. Well, the ESPN also made headlines. And I think, B-Train, you did mention this one, too, just in passing. ESPN made headlines this week with a poll where they polled more than 50 league executives, coaches, scouts, players, and they asked them, all right, rank your top 10 players at 11 different positions, everything from edge rushers to interior offensive linemen, and they started with quarterbacks. A couple of names were missing. You mentioned Lamar Jackson from that top 10, but also here locally, Kyler Murray outside the top 10. He's in the, quote, honorable mentions section with Lamar Jackson and the Raiders' Derek Carr. So pump the brakes or not, Kyler Murray is not a top 10 quarterback.
I'm not going to pump the brakes. I think he's right on the outside, but I do believe I can name 10 quarterbacks that have had a better start to their career than Kyler Murray. He's a guy that is on the ascension to be a really good quarterback, but when you talk about what the other quarterbacks have accomplished thus far, I have to give them the nod over Kyler Murray for now. That can change if he's able to put together an unbelievable season this year and get into the playoffs and make some hay in the playoffs, then we'll reconsider this list. But I have a problem with that top 10 list because there's guys on that list that haven't done jack squat in the playoffs. And to me, all quarterbacks are judged by their playoffs and were they able to get their teams to the playoffs. Granted, it takes more than a quarterback to get to the playoffs, but that's the grading scale that we use. Did you get your team to the postseason, and did you do anything while you were in the postseason? So there's some guys that shouldn't be in the top 10, but I think Kyler, who I believe is either 11 or 12, is slotted right where he should be.
Yeah, he's listed just on the outside of the top 10 in the, quote, honorable mention category with Lamar Jackson and Derek Carr. The list, if you haven't seen the list yet, Grose, before you dive in here and tell me if you're pumping the brakes or not, Aaron Rodgers is number 1, followed by Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tom Brady at 4, Joe Burrow at 5, probably just because of the glasses and the fits that he wears to the park on Sundays. Matt Stafford at 6, Justin Herbert at 7, Russell Wilson at 8. His new digs up in your former stomping grounds, B-Train in Denver. Deshaun Watson, who hasn't played football in a year, mind you, coming in at number 9, and Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys signal caller, coming in at number 10 on the list. That's your top 10 list, voted on by, again, NFL executives, coaches, and their own peers, the players in the league.
So I'm going to go about the same place as B-Train went with that, and I'm not pumping the brakes either. I think Kyler Murray is exactly where he should be. Formerly from the state of Missouri, the show me state, that's what Kyler Murray has to do, right? You got to win a playoff game, man. And I agree, to get on that. I have some issues with that list. Not major issues, but, maybe a little shake up. I would order it at the bottom a little bit differently. But to answer your question, 11, 12, right in that general area, I think Kyler Murray's right where he should be. And it goes back to something that we talked a lot about, when the movement and the draft was happening after last season, is you look at how loaded the AFC is in quarterbacks. I mean, it's ridiculous. When you take somebody like Russell Wilson, move him out of the NFC, drop him into the AFC West, and you got to have a conversation where he ranks just in that division. The AFC is absolutely loaded at that position. Kyler Murray, you're in the right spot. Show me you can be better, and then we'll slide you up.
All right, question 2, NFL.com. They had an article where they listed the most important player for every team outside the quarterback. So quarterbacks were removed. Who's the most important player for that team? For the Arizona Cardinals, it's J.J. Watt. He was selected for the Arizona Cardinals' most important non-quarterback. And I agree with that because they're going to need somebody to step up along that defensive front. So pump the brakes or not, however, because this is the blurb that they have. Let me read this to you first. It says, quote, Arizona desperately needs a Watt MVP-type season to control the defensive front and generate pressure. So pump the brakes or not, coming off a season where he missed 10 games again, an MVP-type Defensive Player of the Year season, those days are behind J.J. Watt.
So, wait a minute. Give me the question one more time.
Pump the brakes or not, MVP/Defensive Player of the Year type seasons are behind J.J. Watt.
Yeah, I'm not pumping the brakes on that. He's not winning MVP. He's not even the best defensive player in his family now. That belongs to T.J. Watt, his brother out in Pittsburgh. So, yeah, those days are behind him. I look at this team, and to me, I believe that Rodney Hudson is probably the most important player. Now, the best player is going to be, our guy on the outside. But I still think that for what he brings to the table, I think that Rodney Hudson is probably going to be the, outside of Kyler Murray, the most important player for the Arizona Cardinals.
100% agree. And it's like if we were sitting in the same room, I think you were looking on my paper here because Sean asked a question. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. And when he was asking the question, I wrote Rodney Hudson. You not only what Rodney Hudson means to the guys on the left of him and the right of him on the offensive line, but most importantly, the guy immediately behind him. We talk about where Kyler Murray is. We saw what the numbers were for this team without Rodney Hudson when he was down with COVID last year. And to me, I don't think it's even any question. And I agree also with what you were saying. You look at J.J. Watt, obviously you want him to stay healthy and play for more than he did last year. Whether or not he's capable even of an MVP season at his age, I don't think that's a question that's even worth asking.
Yep.
To me, he's not even the best player on the defense, as you said. Again, look behind. Budda Baker is the face of the defense, and to me, the most important player on that defense, and would be among the top players I would, if I couldn't take Rodney Hudson, and Budda Baker for me is at or near the top of that list for the Arizona Cardinals.
See, I think you guys nailed it with the Rodney Hudson because of what he can do for that entire offensive line and the quarterback behind him, as you mentioned. But, I think where they're going with this is it's not necessarily who's the best player on the Cardinals outside the quarterback. It's who's most important. And right now, who's generating that pass rush for you up front? Are you going to have to manufacture it, with your scheme and send pressure? And, where is it coming from when you need to be able to get after the quarterback with only sending 4? Where is it coming from?
Yeah.
So I think where they're going, with this article is they got to find it somewhere. J.J. Watt is probably the best suited right now. Can he be that guy, though? I think that's where they're pointing at him being most important.
So they were going to have
seen
to
the article.
manufacture. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen the article, but I'm guessing there's not a lot of offensive linemen on the article. Perhaps
Probably not.
It's not a sexy topic, right? Like, who's your most favorite offensive lineman? But I think when you drill deep and where this team is really vulnerable, I think I still wouldn't change my answer and would agree with B-Trent on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're going to have to generate pass rush anyway, even if they'd have had Chandler Jones still on the team, because J.J. Watt is still an unknown. And outside of Chandler, there's not a lot of proven commodities that's able to get after the quarterback on the defensive front for the Arizona Cardinals. They've got some guys that have made plays here and there, but as far as consistently being that threat, I don't think there's anybody there. So Vance Joseph was going to have to get creative with blitzes and timely blitzes and all those type of things and bring pressure when they least expect it. They were going to have to do that anyway. And so now that you don't have a Chandler Jones, what are you going to do?
Nationally in the NFL, there's been a lot of buzz at whether Sean Payton would return to the sideline or not, and that was brought back up again with an article out of Miami this week. So pump the brakes or not, Sean Payton will return to coaching next season, and it will be with either the Dolphins, Chargers, or Cowboys. Pump the brakes or not.
I'm not pumping the brakes on that. I think he'll be back in the NFL, and I think he will be with the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's been too much talk from Jerry Jones about Sean Payton. Why would you be talking about somebody that's not affiliated with your organization anymore if you didn't have a secret love affair with him? He's a guy that he kind of got away when he went to the Saints. They understood that he needed his opportunity, and they had somebody in place already. But I just don't see how, if you're Mike McCarthy, and how I think the Cowboys are going to do, which I hope they go 0-17 personally, but that's just me. I think that they're going to struggle, and I think they're going to end the Mike McCarthy era after 3 seasons and finally bring in the guy that they kind of wanted all along.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Grose?
I'm right there, and he'll be back. And I was thinking the Cowboys too, and I think that still makes a lot of sense. But you said the Los I got $1 damn it.
Yep.
The Los Angeles Chargers. That to me is a fascinating decision when you think about all, and you were saying it earlier, Sean. You think about all the talent that they have on that roster and how they've really underachieved here. And again, with their quarterback, they're still young. That window is still wide open. But if they don't get it done now, to have somebody like Sean Payton come in and inherit that roster, wow. I think that would be fascinating to see.
Yeah, I'd agree. Brandon Staley, constant questionable decisions last year cost the Chargers big time, right? Especially in that Week 18 game against the Raiders when the winner get in and they lose. Justin Herbert being on the roster, he'll be going in. This will be year 3 for him. So if they don't win again, there's probably going to be changes, with the Chargers. Again, I personally believe they're the best team in the West, and I think they do get in the playoffs, and I think Brandon Staley probably is still there. But when the Cowboys don't win the NFC East and the Eagles win the NFC East this year, and that is going to happen, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys will be making a change. I agree with you. I think Sean Payton's back on the sideline, and he's with the Dallas Cowboys. Real quick, NBA, still Kevin Durant talk, and again, by the time you're listening to this, something could have come down by now. But pump the brakes or not, for the Phoenix Suns' sake, and there's a lot of things being thrown around, a lot of different packages, a lot of people throwing out the hypothetical trades. Anything including Bridges is too much for Kevin Durant. Pump the brakes or not?
No, I'm not pumping the brakes on that. I think maybe I am pumping the brakes, because I think if you can get Kevin Durant, I'm throwing in Mikal Bridges. I understand he's an up-and-coming player. He should have been Defensive Player of the Year this year, but we're talking about Kevin Durant. If you have an opportunity to get Kevin Durant, Mikal Bridges is not standing in the way of the Phoenix Suns acquiring Kevin Durant, a guy that's arguably the best player in the game right now. With all apologies to Giannis and to anybody else, I just feel like if you have an opportunity to get him, a guy that hadn't even made an all-star roster is not going to be a piece that you just hold on to and you hold the line for and say, well, no, we're going to keep Mikal Bridges and we're going to pass on Kevin Durant. No, you give him up immediately if you have a chance to get Kevin Durant.
Yeah, intuitively, I agree with B-Train, right? You know, when you talk about a generational talent in Kevin Durant, but it's still hard for me to get my mind around it. Again, what we've experienced the last couple of years, go back to what I said about JaVale McGee going away and signing with Dallas this week. You know, I could kind of say the same thing here, but it's Kevin Durant. Like, you got to do that, and you got to hope it works out, and then fill in the pieces around him, around Chris Paul, and around Devin Booker.
All right, so we always wrap it up with some pop culture on the Pump the Brakes segment, right? Apparently, I didn't know this. Nobody told me. I didn't get the memo. But apparently today is National French Fry Day. All right? Now, there was a survey. You guys know I got to wrap things up with a survey. And it found that McDonald's still has the best fast food French fries. Are you pumping the brakes or rolling with that, B-Train?
Pump the brakes. Anybody that says that McDonald's has the best anything, check their head. Right now, Chick-fil-A has the best fries, bar none.
Yes.
Those waffle fries are by far and away killing the game.
Yes.
It's not even close. Wendy's is a distant second. My beloved Whataburger is third. But make no mistake, it is Chick-fil-A by a landslide. And nobody is really close.
Yes, you're 1,000% correct. And when you can dip it in the Chick-fil-A sauce, it just makes it even better. You are 100% correct. Grose, where are you at on this? Are you pumping the brakes as well? McDonald's not the best French fry. Apparently, it's National French Fry Day.
Yeah, I'm not going with McDonald's either. I think they're overrated. But I'm going to disagree. I'm not going to Chick-fil-A. I'm going to Wendy's. Sorry. I think for me now, I don't want to go to the drive-through and get fries in and sit in the little container for a while. Then they're kind of soggy and I mean, they got to be the fresh. They got to be the fresh ones. Like it's almost better to go inside, right? Go inside and make sure you wash them, take them out of the fryer, and put them into your bag before you take them. So they got to be fresh. They can't be all, melded together and that kind of stuff. But I'm going Wendy's. Sorry, just no disrespect.
The top five in this particular poll had McDonald's 1. It did have Chick-fil-A 2. All right, so we're not far off there, B-Train. Five Guys came in at 3. Wendy's came in at 4. And Arby's came in at 5 because those curly fries are pretty bomb, not going to lie. Those are not bad. Ooh. I can't tell you the last time, though, I can't even tell you the last time I saw an Arby's. I couldn't tell you where one is right now. That's how long it's been since I've been to Arby's. But their curly fries are pretty legit.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you said let's go to Arby's right now, I'd have to put the map on my phone and figure out where the closest ones are. Yep. I like the voice guy on their commercials, though. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, the deep voice
guy. He's killing the commercials. Yeah, he's really good.
That, my friends, is today's Pump the Brake segment. So, of course, you know how we wrap things up. B-Train's already got the glasses on. For those of you watching the program on YouTube right now, he's going to deliver a dad joke of the week. No matter what, he's going to get one of these because there is an official grading scale. It starts with a little rim shot. If it's a quality dad joke, you're going to hear that laughter. If it's above and beyond, you get the standing O. But there's that chance that it just doesn't land and you hit one of these. We all go away feeling a little bit ashamed and it has happened before. So, B-Train.
There we go.
Take it away.
All right, here we go, fellas. What's Irish and stays out all night?
What's that?
Patio furniture.
That's good. That's good. You see, Grose, because a lot of the last names in the Irish culture, Pat and O. Did you get it?
Patio furniture.
Wow.
I didn't get it at first, but now that you explain it to me, Sean,
All right, good. I'm glad.
I'm down with it. I figured that. I figured right there that 4 years in South Bend paid off for B Train, man.
Yeah.
That's that solid Irish indoctrination right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah,
You gotta love
no
it,
doubt
fellas.
about it. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Train and Gross. Episode 79 is in the books. Hey, stay hydrated, and we'll catch you next time with B Train, Sean Crespin, and Mike Gross.
We'll holla.